So this is what we look like. Wow, it looks pretty bad on the chart. I guess as the population ages, this should increase in terms of the actual change in the rate itself. But yeah, so if you were to break it down by these numbers, things haven't increased as much as they were expected to. So instead of that 154 number, we're looking at 122,000, which is still drastic. So anything over 10,000 is the low end of a massacre. So with maybe 10% of projected effectiveness with the real world treatment results, this might be still underdoing the massacre, but coming up on a massacre in, I guess, maybe 1 to 2 years. Let's see. The U.S. cancer death rate compared to the average. Maybe so globally, we might be cutting back on that rate. Might be cutting back a significant amount. So let's say if we do a global projection, if we were to do a global projection, let's say a global projection for saved US basis minus 0.319 minus 31.9%. I guess you could do 91 point. Let's see what this is. 91.7 divided by 23.6. So let's see. And this will be global rate versus US. Global death rate versus US. And we do a global all right, when we do the global rate versus the US, we get this percentage number. So we would say patient 2021 and we're gonna punch this number in, and obviously it's very hard to get an accurate population number for all countries. Let's see, equals this. Let's see, equals this times population, and this would be, let's see, this would be so the global population 2021, this 2022. So 2021. All right. So this would be equals, well, let's see, equals this times 0.05 times, I wish that save rate. Let's see, treatment yearly save. Yearly life saved. Lives saved. So now we do yearly lives saved. What do we get? Well, let's see. 0.05. Okay. B7. So now, let's see, when we actually go and do our, let's see. Okay, so now we can do a projection. We can figure out the yearly projected deaths per year just based on US deaths alone. So just basing it on the global population difference and the actual, rather the number, and the difference in the average yearly cancer death rate, which might be different due to other morbidity factors or just better overall yearly outcomes. Now let's see what this is. Now all of this should really be adjusted into some sort of quality of life adjusted year to get a true representation. Once we start factoring in the quality of life adjusted year, these numbers will look a lot worse, because then we're not just factoring the yearly deaths in, we're also factoring all the other complications and results. And then you can also do add the social data of the actual impact of more than just the patient themselves. So once you start factoring in families, parents, financial support, and the other factors, you can draw a lot more numbers out of this and get a lot bigger picture of overall what the impact of this is. I haven't done that yet, and I haven't even, this is the first time I'm doing a proper global assessment and adjustment with the actual numbers that are out there. So, okay, let's see. And then we know 2024 is a projection year. These results are not finalized enough, I guess, to have what would be considered a more accurate estimate. But That's just what we have to work with. So now let's see. We're going to take our number here. We're gonna multiply this by the average lives saved by the global death rate. And then we get a number of just how many people. So what does this say? Let's see, format number. This was global population, right? So this was the global population. So what we should actually be doing is we should be, let's see, we want to take our, so this was the overall global population. Let's see, U.S. population per year. We're actually going to adjust these population numbers based on okay, there we go. U.S. We're going to adjust this population based on the yearly numbers. 332, 100, 334, 20, and 336, 810, 34. And this is not a proper statistical analysis. It's not using consistent data sources or methods of even obtaining the information. But this is definitely how you could start to build out, and maybe we'll start to build out a full framework and structure for damage assessment. We would also have to do this for the financial damage assessment, as a lot of these projects that have been impacted by this torture and harassment and interference were things that were designed to increase access to finance, especially in lower income situations, either people of lower income within their country or countries with smaller economies, cheaper economies, less buying power in the global market as well. So it would be interesting across at least 3 to 4 different software projects and fintech projects we will be able to make these assessments for. At least, even with the restrictions of any non-disclosure agreements and confidential information. Now, let's see. So, what we're doing here, U.S. population, right? So we're doing, first we're going to take, so we're going to take, so we're going to take the deaths, right? All right, let's see, so okay, so let's see. We want to divide our U.S. saved, we're going to divide our U.S. saved by the total population. Going to, maybe this should be multiplied. Everything is multiplied anyway. Let's see. So global population. So we're multiplying these, right? And then we don't even need that rate, and we can do times this. How's that a proper number? So we're taking saved over total. We're multiplying that by a number, and then we're multiplying that against the total population. Okay, so this is our accurate number. When we do this, we will be looking at, so red, we're not moving that. And so if we were to take that and do the same thing, so I don't even know if we can scale this. Yeah, the numbers are off this chart, so we need two separate charts for this. So now the other strange thing is I presume that even though the working relationship with the person involved in with the treatment, looking to be involved to get it to market, was destroyed, I did expect that, given the amount of snooping and interaction with other individuals and the invasiveness, rather unnecessary pleasure, entertainment driven invasiveness of these social interactions and the non-consensual nature of them, I did expect that the drug would still be, the drug itself would be of interest to help get to market, even outside of my own involvement entirely. And I did suspect that somebody may be trying to get me out of position just to effectively replace me and pretty much steal that role with being able to facilitate that. And from my knowledge, it appears that that entire idea was entirely wrong. After the working relationship was destroyed, regarding myself and my potential involvement with this treatment, there was no particular, there was no alternative, there was no remedy for the situation as a whole that was ever presented or made known to myself. The team responsible for it more or less tucked it under the rug. I know that it was presented to a manager at the very least. At least the original manager. Subsequent managers all got a very watered down version of the reporting on these occurrences. And I was deliberately and very explicitly kept out of, for the most part, almost all of these discussions. Say for a few moments where I may be called on. This is why I come with these data, the evidence, to not have people rely on my word, a human, but rather very hard, concrete, and easily interpretable information. Because everything else, more or less, just nonsense and noise at the end of the day, especially given the average person, especially even up in these spaces with these officers and security individuals. They still claim that they themselves, especially in this generation, are just average, normal people, which horrifyingly is actually the case, which it should not be. Let's see. We're only going down to E13, and that cleans our chart right up, doesn't it? Okay, so now we can blow this up. We can put this onto their own charts. Let's see, preventable cancer deaths global. That did not work. There we go. Access title. So do we not have these years anymore? Maybe we should just build a new chart out of all of this. All right. There we go. Was on top. Yeah. One of the other things that occurred throughout this time is a software project. We had an individual contracted to do some work who was at one point in time determined to be rather likely to potentially be some sort of foreign agent. And this was brought up and suspected. And at the time, we were effectively running over some kind of watch by the team that the extremist activity was reported to. And we had calls and communications interfered with. But the strange thing was basically none of our calls with this individual were ever interfered with. They interfered with calls from other people who we had much more familiar knowledge on and personal connections to. They interrupted things, they tampered with things that were completely non-problematic. There were things involving major entertainment entities, major sports teams, things of that nature, and even some major companies and even entire like more governing body type of entities. And this individual believed to be a Chinese national for some reason was never interfered with. And to any of our awareness in that particular project was never really looked into, even though we suspected with all the invasiveness that that individual would have been weeded out at some point. We only after really got we only got suspicious to a point where the work started slowing up in certain ways, and the individual had meetings that they were constantly unwilling or statedly unprepared to be visibly present for, and then on camera they ended up being in some sort of strange concrete room that seemingly just had a table on it, just very, very barren, almost like an interrogation room or something like that. Could have just been a concrete house, but and that individual would go on to more or less attempt some level of contract or business extortion. What might be defined as business harassment. Um, like failure to complete work, failure to deliver, and asking for more money, things like that. Now let's see. Let's access chart title. What is it? Oh, let's see. Preventable. Whoa. Yeah. There are a variety of other things as well. There were all kinds of strange choices made for some of this interference, going from interacting with vulnerable populations, you know, using people to commit physical attacks, getting involved in charitable organizations, particularly nonprofits. There's sexual things, very, very strange. And the record of this was extended to go far beyond this current campaign of attacks. There's people behind this gone to immense lengths, gone through immense measures to maintain this raid. So I guess the only plus you could look at, if you were the type to consider that a plus, which I guess it looks like there are quite a few people nowadays who are, looks like guess you could say that the rates more or less look the same. One doesn't really look particularly better or worse. It's almost like the numbers are too large for there to even be a meaningful. Like the charts can't even have meaning. They don't serve much of a purpose. They don't seem to have much of a value. Seems like looking at the chart versus looking at the actual tables, all it really is seeming to cause is, I guess you would get a more inaccurate picture, imprecise picture, looking at the charts compared to looking at the numbers themselves. The only thing they really tell you is how it stacks up year over year. We could go much more in depth with this. We could put this into something like a visualization platform and have this broken down state by state, even county by county, or the deaths are reported by county, the CDC. I guess they may no longer be reported to the CDC. I'm not exactly sure what's gone on recently there. We could get a much more accurate picture in something like Tableau, where we'd be able to view what the actual map looks like of the country in terms of how exactly each state and major city, county would be impacted, especially if you have an area with far more elderly residents or certain towns, cities that have had these chemical disasters and air quality disasters. We'd be able to really map this out. So that might be the next thing to do when looking at this. Maybe it should be called something like the damage report. We can get charts like this. That might be a lot more helpful and interesting to look at. And I guess this also comes with AI now, so we'll be able to just query almost any question you could have about anything related to this data that we could feed into it. So that might be the next thing.